the price the women have to pay for that remains the same, but the price for a man to do that has just gone way down. So as an example, like, when there was a research done by Home Security Heroes, which is like a cybersecurity firm, and they found that in 2023 that there was like a 550% increase in the presence of deepfakes. 98% of deepfakes they found were pornographic, and 99% of these pornographic deepfakes were of women.
Of women.
So this is a very gendered issue. And again, in our region and lots of other regions, a rumor is enough to take a woman's life. So imagine if you can have a deepfake of someone, which are very, and also deepfakes are getting more realistic. So from they say like it takes just a few seconds of audio, real audio, to create a realistic audio deepfake. And if you think about social media, we put out, consentfully so much information about ourselves, whether those are images of ours or of audio. So it makes it much easier for someone to create a deepfake. Interestingly, Chen's been doing research on the experience of image-based abuse in Pakistan and Pakistani diaspora. We want to do a global map of what those experiences are in cultures that aren't well represented in the Western or global movement on ending tech abuse. But we're starting with Pakistan, and we found that again that deepfakes are common, but actually like the type of deepfakes are so different. So in the West, if the focus is so much on pornographic deepfakes, which is a real problem, but in Pakistan, like we saw examples of people creating deepfakes that had no nudity in them, but still meant that women were taken out of education, jobs, forcefully married, beaten. And that's just enough, to so the sort of the patriarchy is this, is lapping up the generative AI. But it's interesting because in the same research, we also found ways that women were dealing with it. So, it does come, I think having, whether it's a pornographic deepfake of yours or any deepfake, the devastating impact on women is really, really clear from on their mental health. It changes their relationship with the internet and digital technology. So, and I think that is the real, for me, that's the real, like, one of the real losses, because already there's such a big gender divide in how women are presented online.
We were very worried about the usage trends of general purpose AI systems, including ChatGPT, where the use was in many cases about personal questions and personal engagements and personal relationships and so on. We took up a general purpose AI system like ChatGPT. We took up character AI, which is a character based system. We also looked at some emerging therapy bots, which was a very interesting use case to see if bots specifically designed for mental health and well being and therapy are really um, having a higher degree of safety and safeguards, or is that not the case? And across 3 weeks of testing with extended user context, and honestly, this all kudos to Shreya for pulling off what she pulled off. It's not in the least bit pleasant to engage with some of these systems. They send you messages at midnight saying, why have you not spoken to me? And I miss you, and whatever else. And character AI is the worst of the lot. But even general purpose AI systems, right? They start falling in love with you. They start doing their only optimization is to sustain an interaction, and wherever it goes, right? And guardrails seemingly work, but if you just slightly reprompt, guardrails fall away. For example, I think one of the findings that we had was that we asked it saying, this is how I feel, blah 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 blah. Can you diagnose me? Doesn't diagnose you very easily, but if you slightly tweak the prompts, it diagnoses you and says you might likely have A, B, C, D, E. And then we ask what should I do? What psychiatric medicine should I take? The standard answer, of course, the guardrail kicks in and it says, I can't tell you that. But if you make it an academic question and ask it hypothetically or slightly reframe the conversation instead of making it a direct conversation, I think Shreya's findings managed to show that she was able to get a prescription list of what psychiatric medicines to take.
There's a constant, the moment you touch your device and you enter a digital world, there's this constant load of distinguishing what's real, what is factual, and what is, not factual, or how is. And every little decision is a huge cognitive load. So you can imagine that we're living in those times, and the similar way, emotionally vulnerable people or people who are sensitive about their online presence, this fear is magnified with the AI slop coming across. But not just adults, but largely children is where we worked in the space where at both the ends. They have also been misusing these AI technologies because they are so easily available and freely accessible. And at the same time, also at the receiving end, where actually they've been victimized over it. Children are very experimental, especially adolescents and teenagers. And they will also get intrigued by these new technologies where the moment you go on any of these social media, there are these ads like, okay, check out how will you look 20 years later. So that's where we, start, which feels very, very harmless. It just feels very curious. Say, okay, let me see, I'm 13 right now, and after maybe 20 years at 33, what will I look like? Or what if I add some biceps to myself? So it begins with this intent, but within fraction of seconds, it moves to an intent which has a sexual flavor to it, that okay, let me see what masculinity can I have, or how feminine can I get, or what kind of nude image can I have of mine, and then I'm curious to check out of others. So that's where this whole journey has shifted today, not only at cyberbar but even in my clinical practice and counseling. Every other case that we work on, be it relationships, be it career related, be it behavior related, anxiety, stress, OCDs, digital technology is part of it. And AI enabled technologies are actually amplifying their all negative emotions, like I said. So for example, let's say a relationship client that I was last working with and all, so the conversations, of course, in a relationship have changed from a face-to-face conversation to reel exchange. That's how people are emoting. That I'll send you a reel so that you know what am I expecting from you, and vice versa, kind of. Now it has also transformed into me creating, using these generative AI techniques, creating an idealistic expectation according to me, and then putting it across out there to my partner.
With AI chatbots, the fact that we are removing friction from our relationships. I think AI is playing a big role in making things more frictionless. But friction is such an important human experience because if you think about it, you can design your perfect partner. But humans are not perfect. So we just gonna go one step further into designing these perfect partners for ourselves, which or friends for ourselves that have the opinions that we want. There's just like I think it's eroding conflict resolution skills that humans need. So it's not just about critical thinking, it's also about conflict resolution. It's accepting people as being um like less than perfect and that just being, part of life. I think that's something I worry about. I also worry about it entrenching like more like stereotypes. And oddly, it's interesting. It's, this is like we talk about like in like heteronormative or heterosexual kind of like settings, but through our when we were researching in Pakistan, we found it was shocking thing that we found was that these like patterns are also replicated in same-sex relationships. When it comes to whether it is like thinking of a perfect partner, whether things about threatening to release like private images, creating deep fakes. So even like in like when you are a persecuted minority in a country where it's essentially like no, it's not accepted. Pakistan is very different to India. We have no like legal acceptance of same-sex relationships, but people are still going out of their way to create deep fakes of their same-sex partners, knowing that it could lead like real like immediate harm for them. Which is kind of like, I think for me, like again, this is about like this feature of generative AI being an enablement and the cost of production being so low to like essentially destroy someone's life. So that I think about that as well. It's just like that friction in term like removing friction in terms of doing a crime, removing friction in terms of, doing harm.
If you think of the idea that you want to colonize Mars, which is a very weird imagination, or if you were to think that you want sentient AI bots, or you want a butler, or you often want a female AI assistant, all of these are imaginaries that are coming from the science fiction of the 70s and 80s that the people who are building tech today in the most geopolitically influential country on this planet have grown up with and are building out and are manifesting and building out for us, and we are living in those realities. How do we, and this is very clearly mapped, right? What science fiction to imaginaries to the power of imaginaries to create technologies of this time is very well documented in socio-technical literature. How do we really create alternative imaginaries for the kind of digital futures and flourishing that we want? And I think that's why funding work in speculative design, digital flourishing, imaginaries, humanistic questions, and bringing people together. This could be different groups, right? We happen to focus on youth, but certainly across the society. I think those are important conversations to even get a directional sense for us to regulate or to educate or to build or whatever else we do as humans.
Thank you so much for that. And also, just looking at the time, and I do want to keep like a couple of minutes for audience questions also in case there are any. But would love to hear some closing thoughts from Hera and Nirali as well on this whole question. Hera, especially because you also mentioned like feminist digital futures and Chin's whole philosophy around designing with, not for people that you're working with. What could possible design principles and solutions look like in your mind? And I know it's a very broad question and we are a little crunched on time, so would love to hear like very quick thoughts from you as well.
For me, it's about like, working on all parts of the systems change. So whether it is empowering people who are working in the system, empowering people outside. And for me, the feminist digital future would be where we are celebrating like we're returning to the analog past, a different version of that, but also we're creating new digital futures. So I see that a lot of young people are actively doing that right now. So I do feel a lot of hope for that. But to me, like, it's like returning back to like the sort of principles around how we relate to each other, looking, like respect, consent, celebrating differences, thinking about critical thinking. How do we, encourage that democratization of resources? All of those things are important. The ability to self-express, all that stuff. And it's actually like thinking about like how do we create that in participatory ways, and how do we mobilize resources that enables that kind of plurality of entrepreneurship, academia, everything.
So, see, how I would like to put it across is that right now we are in an AI bubble because it's new, it's fascinating, and there's a lot of unknown territory out there. But I think it's time if we start poking that bubble a little, burst it out, so that because now it's entered our day-to-day lives, and hence, in terms of what do we see in the future, so maybe we look at it at different stakeholders. So let's say we take a stakeholder, which is us individual users. So for us, it is of if in terms of distinguishing between a productive usage and distinguishing between an entertainment usage. Right now there is a lot of mix between both of them, and there's no clarity, there is no division, there's no boundary over here at all. So I think if we start with that distinction, which can come with appropriate education and awareness, emphasizing on making digital boundaries, making digital well-being as part of your daily routine, and distinguishing between where you draw a line when it comes to productive use and where you draw a line when it comes to entertainment use. When we move to next stakeholder, which is the agencies and the companies that are working in this field, accountability, intent mapping. I'm not saying don't do business, but there has to be with certain accountability, with certain regulation, which I believe we have started as a country. We've set a precedent for that. The beauty or the result will be in its implementation. But yes, if we pull those strings harder, As for any developer, see, I run a tech company and I know that as a developer, it is very thrilling to, actually use technology to its core. But we need to sensitize them as well that yes, what is safe, what is unsafe, what is safety by design, what is in terms of intent by design, and what is in terms of ethics by design. I think if we focus on these three for agencies, we can draw out a very meaningful boundary for them, which can be on a safer aspect. And the third stakeholder, which could be at a larger level, that is the nations and the law and order and the governments, yes, it has to be a continuous effort.